Welcome to the next video of the version 0.5.0. We're going to use the database previously created to show the new features in the current version. This again is going to use data from the Malta air traffic services. Many thanks to them for their support. So if we reopen the previously created database, it already shows that everything has been performed and the start button is available immediately. So we click start and we are met with the management window and the two active views. So let's again load the data. And we can see that we have 4 radars and ATS tracker output in the database. So in this views, not that much has changed. So in the list box view, there is an additional reload button. So if, for example, we would add new variables or change the order or something like that, we could click on reload and this would then trigger the reload process in the same way as if we would use this load button here. This is nice if you have some small changes and you don't want to click back to the management window. In the OSGView, quite some things have changed. So there is also this update button here, which becomes only active if there has been a change and either a redraw or a reload is required. So a redraw means the already loaded data from the database is redrawn once again using, for example, a different representation. And the reload is the same with the list box view and this load button here. So what else has changed here? So first, let's zoom in a bit. Another operation now is available, the label multiple action. So in this previously 4 actions here, now you have this action available where you can use to draw a rectangle and all of the data that is inside the rectangle is then labeled. This of course creates a lot of different labels and it's limited in their number. So if you select too large a portion, there is this message that you can only create 100 labels at the same time. The labels can of course then be deleted with the delete labels action. So this is a new thing. Also here in the configuration panel, a few things have changed. So one is that you can now hide and resize this panel, which is quite nice if you want to have, for example, screenshots or inspect larger portions of the data. This is shown by these small points here. And just be aware that this is also persisted. So if I close the application now and restart it again, then the configuration panel is also hidden. But you can re-show it by dragging the right side of the window to the inside again. Here, a new tab exists. So style and height are now different. So in the style tab, you can basically configure how the data is shown. Previously it was called the group mode, now it's the layer mode, which defines which layers are created here. So this allows you to, for example, define which data you want to see, because you can disable showing the data and basically select on based on which attribute you want to do that. Now, additionally, the call sign is available here, which it wasn't before. So this is new. Also now you have the so-called blend mode, which can be changed. So the blend mode is basically a rendering setting, and previously the data looked like this. So you have this small contour around the symbols, which allows you, if you have a lot of overlapping data, to better discern which symbol is actually used. And now additionally you have the source over mode, which then removes this contour, you could say, which allows you to discern colors better because you don't have this grayish area line. The most important changes were in the styling configuration. So now there are different modes available how the data is drawn here. So there are different presets that can be used out of the box. Let's start with the default setting. I've selected that, nothing changes, but the redraw button became available. So let's hit that. And now this redraws all of the data. Now everything is gray. This is like a base style, and it can be configured using the default style here. So this default style is used for all of the data. This selects the color, line width, opacity, the symbol, and the symbol size. You can click on the values to change them. All changes made here in the style are immediately updated in the representation. Okay, so now let's switch back to the previous style, layer color by database object. So in each layer, we have the information available from which database object the data comes. And in addition to the default style, there is a rule generator. A rule generator defines how rules are generated. For example, generating a new color by database object and a symbol by database object. Now, when data is loaded, rules are generated according to this generator, which says now, okay, for a database object, radar, override some values from the default style, and in this case, the color and the symbol. The same for the tracker with a different color and a different symbol. Now the default style still defines all of the attributes not overridden by the generated rules. So for example, the symbol size can still be adapted here. Let's increase the size here. And all of these rules only define the color and the symbol. Okay. Now let's have a different representation. So for example, we now want to change the layer color by mode A code. This still has to be updated using the redraw button, but this is a layer color mode, which means the attribute that you want to use also has to be present in the layer. Okay, so let's switch now to a layer mode, mode 3A code. Now this information is available in each layer, and the color can be generated by the mode A code. Now we hit redraw, and now we end up with a very colorful picture. This takes some time, so it took more than a minute. But after that, now we have a color for each mode A code. You can see now here these rules were generated, so you still have two rules saying the symbol was defined by database object. But then now you have different colors for each of the values of the mode A code. In the layers, of course, now here, you also have all of the mode A codes listed. Each with different colors, but the same symbol. And the symbol then only changes, for example, when you have different database objects. How useful this representation is to be discussed, but I wanted to show off the style. And also, I'd say it can be useful if, for example, if you don't have that much data. So for example, if only a few targets were loaded from the database, then it can be useful. Now, what's also quite interesting is that now on the right-hand side in the Layers tab, you have a counter. This counter states how much target reports are within this layer. So for example, here, mode A code 7 only has 7 target reports, all of them coming from radar, and then from which radar. So now you can see, for example, the mode A code wasn't present that often, and you can discern which track, for example, is longer in the data, if you know what I mean. Okay. Now, let's inspect the data in a different way. So we have also other presets for the style. And of course, we have the call sign, the data source ID, mode A code, target address, and so on. Let's go for the data source. That's also interesting. Let's redraw that. Now the color is defined by the data source. So for example, ATS gets a different color, one radar gets a different color, and so on. For example, ATS now is not blue. Since we haven't changed the layer mode, still the mode A codes are in there, but the colors are defined by each radar or source. This can be useful to, for example, inspect at which point in the geography which data source was used and was active. For example, now we can change the grouping mode back to database object data source ID. We hit the redraw button. And now also the checkboxes here can be used, for example, to disable the data sources. Let's, for example, move radar to the top. Now we have ATS, let's say, in the background. And now we can say, okay, this LQ radar, what was their coverage, and HF. And now you can zoom in, for example, to inspect it for some tracks. Okay, so these are the layer color presets. So just be aware that the variable that has to be used, for example, for generating the rules, has to be present in the layer, otherwise only the default style is used. Other interesting modes are color by something, so not layer color, but something else. And in this case, only the color is set using data that is in the database. This requires, in most cases, a reload. Let's first inspect color by flight level. I will disable the radar data for now, so that we only inspect ARTAS. Now, the generated rules say the color of each target report is defined by the flight level given in each target report. So for example, for a tracker, there's like a maximum color, which is flight level 300, and a minimum color, which is very dark gray. I will now switch to the blend mode source over, and you can see the higher the flight is, the target was at that point in time, the brighter the color is. This way you can discern, better discern overflights from, let's say, approach and departures, for example. What I like to use, especially for tracker analysis, is to use the grouping mode database object data source ID tracknum, then say connect the last layer. Because in this case, this is selective for each target, and then I can have connection lines. Okay, we could of course change the color, but I think the default values should work quite well. Now, let's look at another one, color by speed. So, if this information was available during the ASTERIX import, the speed, so the ground speed information of the tracks is now used to color each target report. So the symbol is still defined by database object. In this case, we only have circles for the tracks. And then we use colors to discern different speed values, and they are interpolated in between. So let's have a look. Now, the lowest speed is gray, basically the same as the default style. A slow moving track, let's say about 150 knots, is blue. The lower it is, the more gray it gets. The faster it is, the greener it gets. Then above that, green is used, that 500 knots is white, and the very fast ones are red. If no speed information is available, there is also like a dark gray for none. I like to use this mode to, for example, identify, let's say, tracks where there are strong changes in the speed. This should not happen. So everything should be like a gradual movement color change. Or what's also quite nice is you can find ones that pop out. So basically small tracks that sometimes are created, let's say, for example, by ground clutter. Commonly they are quite short, and very often they have very high speed because they are noisy in their position. This is quite nice because such small tracks very often pop out. Since there is a lot of data shown here now, I recommend using the time window filter, for example, with a larger time range. And what I do then is just I scroll through the data and try to find these small tracks that should be looked at. Okay. So that's the color by speed. Color by track angle. Somewhat different, also derived from the ground speed, of course. Just to be sure, track angle means the direction of movement. Very often this is also called heading, but heading is at least from the definitions that I use, formally defined as the direction of the nose of the aircraft, for example, but the track angle is the direction of movement, and they are not always the same. So in this case, we're going to color the track angle, which is defined to true north, basically by giving the 4 directions as different color and then an interpolation between them, or a non-color if it isn't set. Let's hit reload to redraw the data. And in the track data, this information is of course provided. So now we see the direction of movement. So for example, north, heading north is red, which gets interpolated to white for west or to green for east, and so on. So now it's easier to discern which tracks moved into what direction, even if they were at the same position. And for example, if you find one that has a nice color, then you can estimate in which direction it went. So what you can use this for is basically discern where is the lot of data, which was the direction of movement, and also if there were like strong changes from target report to target report, then this would indicate that the tracking didn't go so well for this track. Also, you can, for example, find out which ones had very, very strong turns. Okay. Also available would be the color by ATSB quality. Basically for ATSB data only, you have colors for each MOPS version. So version 0 would be orange, green, blue, and red for none if this information is not present in the ASTERIX data. Since we don't have ASTERIX ATSB data in this dataset, I unfortunately cannot show you this mode. I hope these new styles will be beneficial to you. At least for me, they worked out quite nicely. Thank you so much for your time and your interest.